Netflix's Our Planet takes viewers around the globe to see some of nature's greatest wonders. I'm Zach Laws, contributing editor at Gold Derby, and joining me right now is Sophie Lanfear. She's one of the directors of Our Planet. Sophie, you directed the Frozen Worlds episode. First of all, just tell us a little bit about how you came to be involved with this.
Sure. So I worked for Silverback Films, the company that made Our Planet. And when Our Planet was in its conception, Alistair came to me and offered me a job on it and said, would you like to produce one of the episodes? And because it had conservation, the idea was that this would be a big landmark series, but with conservation very much at the heart of it. And I just jumped at the chance because I was like, that is exactly why I do what I do, is because I want to make more conservation kind of heavy films if I can.
Well, now you have, like you said, you've worked with them before, so you're a veteran of nature documentaries. Can you just explain a little bit what you do as a director of a nature documentary?
Sure. So you kind of have the sort of quite a big weight on your shoulder because obviously the landmark documentaries, there have been many wonderful series out there, and so we're always having to think about how we raise the bar, and we're looking for new stories, fresh angles, and so it's your job really. You get your brief is make a conservation film about the frozen worlds, and that's literally all that's given to you. So you then have to construct your narrative and through that process kind of work out what is the central story or thesis of the film, and then how do you place individual behaviors and stories of characters and get a nice blend of like funny with serious, with drama, with spectacle across that show, so it's an entertaining show, but that it has a heart to it. So then you kind of do all of that, you get your narrative, and then it's all about balancing the risk. Like some behaviors and stories and characters that you want to go for are much more risky than other ones. And then, so you're constantly reevaluating your narrative depending on what's coming in shoot-wise. You go out on location and you help shoot them and help the cameramen, get the shots that you need. And you go through storyboarding process for that. And then when you come back, you're going to go through all your rushes. You have to log them, take them into the edit, sit with the editor. You see the whole edit through from start to finish, all the sound, all the narration, get to sit in a commentary call with David Attenborough, and then you deliver your film. So yeah, you see it through the whole process.
Well, certainly there's all kinds of variables whenever you're making any kind of movie that you can't plan for. But with this kind of directing, I have to assume that there's all kinds of things that you have that you have no way of anticipating. What are the animals going to do? What's the weather going to be like? How do you, as a director, I guess, work with those kinds of unforeseeable issues that can arise when you're going into the frozen world?
I think those kind of variables that you can't control, you have this love-hate relationship with it. Like, the spontaneity that nature gives you can far exceed any storyboard that you can think of. But also then, when it's not happening or there's weather setbacks, equally, it's the most frustrating thing in the world. So you kind of have both. It can give you something amazing or it can give you nothing at all. And I think your role as a director is to kind of, again, every day of the shoot, you're reevaluating, you're watching the rushes coming in, and you're making sure that you've got that story developing and what shots do we need. And you work it through together as a team with your cameraman. It's not just all the director, but the two of you, or however many of you on location, are thinking, how do we best tell this story? How do we get character out of it, emotion out of it? And that story does change. You could go into the field thinking you were going to get one thing and come home with something else. So you had to be flexible and just make sure that you have a story at the end of the day.
So in terms of this one, first of all, had you shot in a location like this before? Had you shot in this specific location before?
I had never been to the Antarctic before, but I'd done a lot of work in the Arctic before this series. So I knew the kind of risks and the difficulties and the health and safety, and I've been used to kind of huts and hut life and being very remote. So yeah, that part of it.
So then what kind of a story did you set out to tell? Initially, what were your plans like for it?
So first, I started by going through watching everything I could, every show, every documentary on the frozen world. And one thing I found quite compelling was that they didn't really differentiate between kind of land ice and sea ice. And actually, sea ice is a fascinating habitat. And what most people don't know about sea ice is that it looks white and flat and lifeless. It looks like just a platform that polar bears stand on, but it isn't. In fact, underneath that ice, it's this upside down Serengeti world where you have algae growing on the ice that feeds krill and other zooplankton and crustaceans. And then that feeds all the other animals like penguins, whales, seals, polar bear, fish. So the whole cycle of the poles is all fundamentally part of the sea ice process. And so I thought that's a really interesting narrative. I'm going to tell a film about sea ice because the first half of the film educates you about that, how it works. You know, ice creates life. And then the middle part of the film explains how that productivity radiates out far beyond the shores of these frozen worlds, places like South Georgia that are just teeming with life. And then the final part of the film explains what happens when that sea ice is being lost, which it is in the Arctic at an alarming rate in recent years. So yeah, the film was really, I wanted people to understand sea ice and the importance of sea ice.
Right. Having shot in these kinds of locales before, I guess what you must have known what to anticipate in terms of safety and things like that. But I mean, what can you just talk a bit about some of the risks involved with going out there and?
Yeah, it's great. It's like no matter how much you plan, there's always something that happens on a shoot, some small thing that you could never anticipate. So a lot of it is learning, just being out there and learning. But things like one of the most dangerous shoots I think we did was camping on sea ice, and the narwhal shots in the film, we had to camp on sea ice. And finally, the risk isn't the polar bears so much. I mean, they are a risk, they are around, but it's more that the sea ice could break off. It was at a time of year that the ice was breaking out. And you were constantly worried these cracks would appear overnight between tents and they get bigger and smaller. And you're like, get really paranoid. Is that crack? How big was that crack yesterday? Is it? Because and we're talking 30 kilometers by 40 kilometer piece of ice. So you wouldn't know it had broken off and you'd just be drifting out to sea.
Oh, wow.
And on the last day it did break away. But luckily we were the right site. We'd moved our camp. The guides had got kind of worried about it. So we moved back and it broke away literally within 100 meters of our camp. It just, the whole piece went.
Wow.
So, yeah, that was pretty scary.
Well, I'm glad you're still around. In terms of, obviously you're going out there and you're sort of invading the natural habitat of, polar bears and other animals. How do you, I guess, not necessarily ingratiate yourself into their environment, but just put yourself there in order to disrupt their life in the least way possible? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So we use, exactly that. We're all about, our filmmaking techniques are all about, okay, any human being present is going to affect wildlife. But what we do is we use very long lenses, so over 1,000 mil lenses. And we have to have the animals acting naturally. Otherwise it's not going to work for us. So we always approach with extreme caution. We approach very slowly. We stop, we watch, we don't rush in. You don't see a polar bear and just drive up to it. So we monitor the behavior. We worked around our wild animals to understand the signals they give off. If a bear doesn't want to be followed, we let it go. You have to wait for the right bear. A lot of them are scared of humans. They don't want to be followed. Fine. Let's not push that bear. Let's work with one that doesn't mind us so much. So it's very much fieldcraft and, working downwind or up, like walrus, for example. We had to crawl in on our bellies to get into the walrus, and you could never be upwind of the walrus, so they could never smell you. And you have to sit incredibly still. You have to hide yourself behind rocks so that they can't see you. And every animal's different, but we always put a lot of care and attention into how an animal's reacting and how we are behaving. And we think about that constantly.
You've been traveling around the globe doing this. Is part of the projects that you select, is it to take you to places that you've never been before and to, explore different locales in filmmaking? How do you choose the projects that you want to choose?
Well, we're always looking, you always want to find a new story. I mean, that's like gold in our industry. So I guess in terms of locations, you either go back, if it's a story that hasn't been done for many years, new technology might help you elevate that sequence, or you go and try and film something that's never been filmed before. We were quite on Frozen Worlds. We had quite a few stories that had never really been filmed before. One amazing thing that happened to us was the leopard seals in South Georgia. Normally, you only get one leopard seal; they're solitary. To see one in one area, and in this bay there were 36 leopard seals, and it's undescribed. No one in science has ever seen that many. I don't think there's ever been an observation of that many leopard seals in one area. And so things happen like that you just can't expect or anticipate. And yeah, those kind of things are really amazing.
And in terms of this one, I mean, you mentioned the conservation aspect of it. Can you just talk a little bit more about how you ingratiated that into the film, and also about why that was important to tell?
Sure. I mean, conservation is a hard one because we want it to be mass reaching. I think with these series, we're going for broad appeal and we don't want to put people off. So we think very hard about the balance of conservation, and we don't want people just to be like, oh, here's another, thing bashing us over the heads about conservation. So what we tried to do was engage people, not kind of show, not tell, and engage people emotionally in characterful stories like the walrus, like the polar bears and those little ring seal pups. And I think if you care about the lives of those animals, then when you learn what's happening, you're going to care about conservation. So that's kind of been our approach. And it's not just all about climate change either. Each of the shows addresses things like overfishing, marine protected areas, reforestation. So, and there's positive messages in there. So I hope across the series, we hope there's a blend of kind of good conservation with the kind of more urgent conservation messages. So something for everyone is what we're hoping.
What do you hope the people at home watching on Netflix, take away from this show in terms of like what they can do to help with conservationism?
I think one of the most common things with people's reaction to it is it's such a massive, they think of climate change as just being, well, what can I do? It's just such an insurmountable problem for them. They just think it's something that they can't do anything about. And I would just say, no, absolutely not. I think, don't give up. There is hope. You can do something. You can do things like switch to green energies, change your bank to a sustainable bank that supports green energy and doesn't support fossil fuels. You can do things like recycle things, reuse things. Think about your consumer. Think about what you're buying. Don't replace your clothes every 5 minutes. Repair old ones. There are little things that we can all do in life if we want to help, and if we're not afraid of being thinking through our actions and what we're doing and our consumerisms. Then think about how we can then kind of phase out all the things in life that we don't really need, and then put pressure on policy changes and stand out. It's not acceptable what's going on, and if you make your voice heard, then people have to listen, and change can happen.
Before I let you go, this is another wonderful David Attenborough narrated series. What's it like working with him as a director?
David is a dream. Honestly, he's one in a million, 7 billion. David is just everything you'd expect him to be. He's so passionate, so knowledgeable. He really cares so profusely about the natural world, and he's like a big kid still. He's 92, and his enthusiasm for the natural world is just, it's infectious. You're around him and he's just buzzing, and I think if number one idol on the entire planet is David.
Yeah. Well, Sophie, thank you so much for your time, and congratulations on another wonderful documentary series. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for all the good questions.
Oh, thank you. And thanks to all of you at home for watching. Make sure you click the like and subscribe button below. And make sure you visit us at goldderby.com for all of the latest award show news. Thank you so much.